Well, hey, it's Matt Steen again, and co-founder of Chemistry Staffing, and this is another chemistry conversation. And today, I'm excited. Greg Ligon is joining me. Greg is a member of the Effective Ministry team in Generis, and he is also co-author of a book called Multisite Reimagined. So he and Greg Surratt, or Jeff Surratt, sorry, wrote the book and kind of talking through some of the changes that are going on here, multi-site wise. And so, I mean, Greg, 2020 has just been kind of a normal year for everybody, multi-site as well. You know, talk to me a little bit about what caused you guys to write this, and then let's kind of talk a little bit about what you guys are seeing as far as the multi-site landscape goes, in a post-apocalypse world.
Sure, you bet. Thanks, Matt. It's great to be with you today and talk a little bit about this. Back in March, when the world changed, actually March 10th through the 12th, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, with a group of young senior pastors of some growing churches. And we'd actually spent about a half day together. We were at dinner on that Tuesday evening, March the 10th. And one of the guys looked up from his phone after having received a notification. He said, "Oh, no." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, they've just announced that there will be no crowds at March Madness," which for those of us who are basketball fans, it was like the beginning of the end. That was it. But yeah, little did we know by the time we gathered the next morning, we would be at pandemic status, and these guys would be thinking about how in the world they were going to have a church service on Sunday.
Yeah.
5 days later, and so we moved from scenario planning to reality TV. And literally in 48 hours, those guys, half of them probably didn't have anything in place outside of, maybe a streaming of the worship experience, or probably even more of them, it was at best kind of a recording posted a day or two after the service. And they moved and were able to, make the pivot and stand up an online campus. And so on the 15th, when the church moved from being a multi-site in one campus to being a multi-site church in people's homes, they were ready. And so it's just been a whirlwind since then.
Yeah. And so over the ensuing months, you guys have kind of put your heads together and been watching and seeing what's been going on. I mean, what are you learning?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting. One of the things, of course, that happened immediately because of the fact that everybody had to go online, there was a lot of innovation that happened in terms of what was happening online. So probably 3 weeks before, I'd been at a meeting with some Generis colleagues, and we were talking about multi-site, and we were talking about some of the challenges, particularly around family ministry and student ministry and groups ministry. And kind of the conclusion at that point in time was there was a handful of people that were doing it, but most people had tried it, and in person was working just fine, thank you very much. And so the return on the investment, or the difficulty factor, just kind of had put it on the table, and they'd set it aside. But then all of a sudden they had to, right? And there was no other choice. And so we saw a lot of incredible innovation early on in terms of group ministry and teens and students, and even the online worship experience was, I think, vastly improved. And so there's a lot of great stuff that happened. And then about 8 weeks in, there began to be rumors that we might be able to go back live. And all of a sudden the energy, in many cases, unfortunately, and the resources and the attention moved from the online back into the live experience. And so anyway, that's part of the reality, I think, that we're living in right now. That's been a disappointment to me, because I think that the reality is that digital is here to stay. That does not mean we won't have live experiences. We will. But it does mean that there will always be a digital component, an online component of what it means to be the church in this next season. And we really have to figure that out. It's really important. I think now, as we're kind of going through another wave, of outbreaks and cases, I was on a call yesterday with some churches. They've had to close again. And so I think that we'll probably see some new energy back toward figuring some of this out.
I hope so. I hope so. And I saw some of that same dip. Some of the work that we've been doing, even in this season, has been just saying to churches, hey, you need to pick a lane and you need to run after it and figure out who you're going to be digitally. And just keep going, because it's here to stay, right? It's not changing. So.
Right, exactly. And Jeff Surratt and I, who you mentioned earlier, I love that you call him Greg, because And his brother Greg loves that you call him Greg, because Greg.
I'm not going to live that one down, am I?
But we've worked together for years, and so as we kind of begin to compare notes again in this season, we just begin to say, okay, there's some things that are happening, some of which had already started to happen pre-pandemic, but certainly have been accelerated as a result of this. Of course, the online piece we've already talked about. Some other things I think that we're seeing happening are kind of a reintroduction of venues, and that's partly driven by the fact that churches are looking at their existing facilities and looking for ways to reconfigure spaces that allow them to have multiple places to gather people for worship.
Right.
So if they're limited to a certain number of people in a space, then they have multiple spaces to be able to do that, and so they're able to accommodate more people. So we're seeing kind of a resurgence of the venue model.
Yeah.
Also the micro, house church model, whatever you want to call it. There's been a variety of runs at that through the years. We began to hear the word micro probably most recently the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
But there's a whole lot of that happening now, and it's certainly been accelerated. And a lot of churches have moved their groups model and said, okay, we're now actually having these house churches. 12 Stone Church in Atlanta now has a thing called 12 Stone Home, where they're actually creating a worship experience that's really kind of a house church experience where you can gather with your group and you have worship and community and all the things that are part of what makes a church, right?
Cool.
So the micro piece, mergers, where mergers have been an important part of the multi-site story for a long time. 5 years ago, last research that was done, it was 1 in 3 campuses were a result of a merger. About 18 months ago, that research was updated. It was 40%. And Jim Tomberlin and Warren Bird have just recently released their book, Better Together, kind of an updated version. And I think the statistic they use is that it's either 78 or 82, somewhere in that range, 80% range of churches that have done mergers have had a very positive experience with it and will continue to do more. And so, we're in a season where some of the experts are projecting that we may lose as many as 20% of our churches just from the economic side of things.
Yeah.
And so I'm very hopeful, and Jeff and I are hopeful that this will be a place where some churches that are financially healthy and have some bandwidth and margin will be able to step in and redeem some of these ministries. So anyways, it's exciting stuff that's happening.
That's cool. So let me ask you this, and then we can kind of start to wrap up because I want to honor your time in this. But we're talking now. It's mid-December, and 2021's coming. What do you see on the horizon in 2021? What's the one thing that you see kind of sitting out there when it comes to multi-site and the way that we do churches like this that 18 months ago nobody saw coming? What would be that thing that would surprise us?
Yeah, well, I think the big opportunity here is really to seize the opportunity that this is providing. I mean, we went from a season where there was questions about whether or not multi-site is effective as a strategy. There are even conversations about it if it's even theologically appropriate. But I think the reality is we're in this season, we've seen it can work.
Yes.
And there are new opportunities. There are people that are showing up at your church online that have not and will not show up at your church in person.
Yeah.
And there are great stories of lives that have been changed for Christ as a result of that. So I think the thing that if I have to encourage pastors and leaders in churches to lean into one thing, is to lean into, what's this online thing going to look like? And again, we're going to be back live. The greatest percentage I'm hearing so far, though, is 60%. It's really more in the 20 to 40% range is where I'm hearing most of this. We'll be back live, but as we're walking through this season, let's learn from it and let's figure out what are the things that we can do to be more effective as a church in reaching the communities that we're a part of and much beyond that.
That's a good word. That's a good word. Learn from what we needed to do, and let's take the best from it and put it to work. That's great. Greg, thank you so much. If we wanted to kind of learn more about you and how you serve with churches, where do we find you?
Yeah, there's a couple of places, particularly with the multi-site stuff. You can go to generis.com/multisite-reimagined. And I think Matt said that'll be placed in the show notes. But again, it's generis.com /multisite-reimagined. You can also find me at generis.com /Greg Ligon, and also at Ligon Group, Ligon group.com.
Great. Well, we will definitely put that down below and link off to the book. And thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate the work you're doing for the kingdom. And thank you so much for taking some time with me today.
You bet. Likewise, Matt. Appreciate the opportunity.